Saturday morning, normal, early, new input. I have a little 10-week-old kitten who knows what time I need to get up. How does he know that? Because he knows it's Saturday. You have to get up and do a show with your good friend, Dewey Freeman.
There you go. So we're on cat time or kitten time, perhaps.
I don't know how so we have body clocks. We know that. And some people don't, they're blessed. They don't have to set an alarm. I set an alarm because I don't want to miss. And especially we record early on Saturday mornings. But during the week, I normally wake up at 6:30. 6:29, he comes crawling up right here and just start licking me. And it's like, yes, please.
Dad.
Thank you very much. And then the alarm goes, he's like, how do you know? How do they know, Dewey?
I wish I knew. Is he there right now? Is he hanging out in the room?
He is sitting in the room, and I have probably 20 robins sitting out having their breakfast, and he's contemplating them for breakfast because he's like, oh, I like the birds pops. Hey, I'm Mark Sylvester. This is Dewey Freeman. We're the Elder Council. And this week, Dewey, I was thinking about, I read this great piece where the guy said, why do we spend so much time trying to hack our productivity? And by that, he was meaning we don't feel as if we're as productive as we could be. So we're going to try to hack that some way. So that shows up as, I'm going to get better to-do list management, better task management, better note app. I'm going to get a better prompt. I mean, it's just all of these various things that will help me be more productive. And his thesis was, fuck all that. Just do the work. And that spoke to me so loudly, it just screamed at me, because for my entire adult life, if I had one quote that guided me, it is, the world belongs to those who show up.
Ooh. So what does showing up mean to you as you
so here's a perfect example. And I added my own little 3 words to that.
Perfect.
Which is with a plan. So here's the world belongs to those who show up. So you get a notice. The city elders, the city council, the board of supervisors, whatever that is for you, is going to decide the fate of the city on Thursday night at 7:30. You're invited. How many people show up?
2.
Okay.
Maybe.
So who gets listened to?
The 2 people that show up.
Exactly. So if you want to make a difference in anything, the first thing, just show up. Most people, seriously, and this has just blown me away my whole life, they just don't show up. And then I found out, so you could just show up, and if I don't have a plan, I'm just there, then I'm either going to agree to a plan that's already in place, or I'm going to comment on a plan that's already in place. But there's typically not, you're invited to brainstorming. However, if you think about it ahead of time and you show up and say, you were talking about the fate of the city, and I was thinking about that, and I have some ideas. Oh, well, Mr. Sylvester, we'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you very much. And this has guided me. This is why if it's important to me, the first one to raise my hand and say, I was thinking about that. And what about this?
Right. So in showing up, I like your example of showing up for a meeting. What I wonder about is how do people show up for themselves? Because, you know, we all sort of have a board meeting in our head.
Reminds me of another thing is that one of these days I want to do a show on creating your own personal board of directors,
Perfect.
right? So that kind of falls in with this. Maybe we'll roll that in. So keep going.
Yeah. So we have a board meeting in our head, and we have somebody that hopefully is, running the show and putting together the agenda and looking at the financial piece and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, interestingly enough, for the people who are watching this, Mark and I had a brief discussion right before we started recording about some of the stuff we may or may not be doing with the previous recordings. And part of that was, it was sort of a little miniature board meeting.
Yep.
It was what are we going to do with these? How are we going to do it? Who might we invite in to help us? What might it cost, et cetera, et cetera. So was interesting about that to me is that we had the meeting and we came up pretty quickly. I mean, I don't know, maybe we talked 5 to 7 minutes and came up pretty quickly with a short-term action plan. It was like, okay, here's these ideas. I'm going to talk to a certain person. You're going to talk to a certain person and look into a certain kind of thing. And it's like, oh, so I know that both of us will do that. And probably within a week, we will have another discussion about this. Even though our meeting isn't planned to have another discussion, I know that we will. One of the things I see happening with a lot of people and is there's more discussion about how to plan what we're going to plan versus planning it. Or there's more.
You know what I call that? I have a word
No,
for
but
that.
I want to hear.
I call it the pre-mumble.
Instead of that preamble.
The pre-mumble.
The pre-mumble.
Right.
And it's like,
let's get to it. Right. Let's do the work. Right. Whatever that is at any given moment, it's about doing the work. And it's not procrastination. That's part of it. But I believe there is resistance. And Stephen Pressfield writes extensively about resistance. And that kind of, if you were to look at his body of work outside of his screenplays, it's all about resistance and what resistance looks like. He's a writer, and resistance is a good one because I'm going to sit down to write, okay, well, I'm going to sharpen all my pencils, make sure I got a lot of paper, and I'm going to check everything. I got my tea, got flowers. Okay, it's catfish. I got 800 things on my checklist, the pre-mumble before I start to mumble. And those are all distractions. You can just get up, sit, open your eyes, and just start spewing to get things going. You can do that. It's totally okay to do that. I'm curious how people have such a problem with that, because I've always just do the work. But I see it all over, and I know you see it all the time with your clients. And doing the work in today's instance is do the work on yourself, or do the work in the relationship, or typically going to be in some relationship, do the work with a boss, do the work with someone. Have, to me, having a hard conversation is doing the work.
So as you're talking, and it's bringing up, I literally 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, was up the hill feeding my horses, and cleaning manure out of their feet and making sure they're okay. We had a, storm yesterday, et cetera, et cetera. And what kept going through my mind was how many people are afraid to get dirty.
Huh.
And and I mean, and sometimes I'm talking about literally getting physically dirty.
Yeah, I think yeah. Take that any way you want, listener.
Yeah. But also when you said to have a hard conversation, that's also what I mean about getting dirty.
Yeah.
When we're sitting and we're sharpening our pens and pencils and we're gathering this, and we have to have a particular exact kind of notebook to write in, and
Oh, really? I have no idea what you're talking about.
and
I have to have
I
my
think I'm going to see it
particular
for
notebook,
I
and I
get
buy
it.
by the case.
And that it's it's like, are we willing to sit down and just start writing, or are we willing to sit down and just start doing something? Are we willing to have a level of discipline of um, to just do it? And um, and I am totally spacing, and I totally apologize for this. The book that you sent me,
Oh, it was Stephen Pressfield's Put
yeah,
Your Ass Where Your Heart Is. That's
right,
his new book.
right, and which frankly I love, and so, and I apologize for spacing the name but it's like, are you willing to put your ass where your heart is, and do you have a sense of what that means? Um and he was talking about writing, and I have listened to other people speak about writing, and are you actually willing to sit down for an hour a day and write? Are you willing? And I'm not talking about getting ready to sit down to write, and I'm not talking about going through a whole process of of getting ready to write, and then you have 10 minutes and then you go, oh, well, I'm not going to get anything done anyway, so I'll just go. But it's not just about writing. Are you willing to actually work?
Yeah.
And um and I want to share a story here. So I'm finishing up with a client the other day, young man, 28, 29 years old, and we're talking, and we're actually talking about him coming to the Man Uncivilized initiation. And he's excited about it. And then he goes, well, what kind of a break can I get financially? And I'm going, none. And and it's like, well, if I offer this, well, none. Well, if I offer this, none. And finally I said to him, and I'm looking at him, I'm saying, well, what can you afford? And he said he offered a number which was about half of what the initiation cost. And I looked at him and I said, so there's going to be 4 of us there that will be being paid. So the other half of that, which is, I'll just round number, I'll make it 1,600. What that means is that each of us are giving you $400.
Put a fine point on it.
And he looked at me like I was from Mars. And then I said, each of the men who are there who will be leading, I know all of them personally very well, have worked their asses off. Are you working your ass off? And he looked, And he looked at me like, again, maybe this time, like I was from Venus or even a planet further away. And it was like, where is the piece of him stepping in and doing that work so that he can provide the resources for himself instead of asking for those resources to be given? And I like this guy. I mean, he's a good guy. He's athletic. He's smart. He's, you know, there's a good man. And where is that piece of going, yep, it's time for me to be putting in the work. It's time for me to be getting dirty. It's time for me to struggle. It's time for me to, if I'm going to write my shitty first draft. And what I wonder about, and I go back and forth between, is somebody lazy? Is somebody afraid? Is somebody entitled? Is what's behind that? And I think there's probably different reasons behind that. Most of them probably come down to some sort of inner self-judgment.
You said a word that got me thinking there. You said, are you willing to do this? Are you willing to that? You kind of made a list of the are you willing to? And he said, are you willing to struggle? And I hadn't, I make the joke, hey, it's called work. It's not called play. It's called work, right? It's not fun. You make it as fun as you can, but it's work. But
Right.
by saying, are you willing to do the struggle? Are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to do the struggle? Because it is work a lot of times is a struggle. You see how what's your perseverance like? What's your attention to detail like? It's a struggle. It's a way to look at it. And that's not a judgment. It's just, I'm going to have to work through this, a struggle through this. And I don't know why this word hit me, but are you afraid of the struggle?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I thought you would say yes. And it gets to fear, which is a fear of the unknown. And I don't know if I'm going to be any good at the work.
Well, that's one of the pieces. Another is when we struggle, we actually might lose.
Which
we
is
actually,
the risk.
right. We actually might not be able to do what we want to do. We actually might get into a conflict with our partners and have a few days that feel really shitty. We might, we might fall off our horse. We might break a bone. We might, and either literally or figuratively, we might, we might do all of those things. So another quick story is, and this is another young man that I work with who, again, very bright, very kind being, literally got his first job ever, real job. And it's actually caring for horses and mucking stalls 3 days a week, like 10 hours a day. And it's in a climate that's hot and buggy, and where when he's out working, he's sweating, and it's like the first thing he does when he gets home is sort of strip off his clothes and put them in a pile by the door because they're not smelling so good. And he jumps in the shower, and his self-concept has skyrocketed.
Huh.
And
how old did you say he was?
He's early 30s.
And it's his first job. Wow.
It's his first heavy duty job. He fortunately comes from a family that is financially
Yeah, exactly.
well
Would
off.
have to be. Yeah.
But it's not, and there's no put down to him. It's um but part of what he's getting is that the work, the struggle, the getting dirty, um the I really don't want to keep going at 2:30 in the afternoon when it's 110 degrees, but I have X, Y, and Z to finish. And um, those are the kinds of things that I wonder what's happened to that with some of our young men.
Mm.
And I wonder what has happened to that with, you know, what we have learned or what we have taught people to as an underlying ethic to where they sabotage themselves actually in the world.
So the word sabotage makes me think of self-sabotage, and it feels like it's one of those therapeutic buzzwords that people will attach to some behavior and say, oh, well, you're just self-sabotaging and get over
Mhm.
it. And so I'm curious, help me understand, because I'll hear that from people said, I was doing that to myself. And once I stopped doing that, I was able to proceed. Now, with me, I don't have a direct relationship with ever having done that I'm aware of, because been an entrepreneur since I was 16, and at 12 I wanted some money and my mom said, get a job.
Mhm.
So okay, that's what you do. You go get a job,
You go get a job.
figure it out, go get a job. Um, and if I sabotaged anything, I was a direct a recipient in a bad way of the sabotage. So I was
Of the bad news that comes
what's
with it.
what's the opposite of self-sabotage? That was me. Um, but I know this is endemic. It's absolutely, I hear it all the time. So how do you here's the I'm finally get the question, doctor. I'm going to guess you're trained to see it when you hear it. What is it that people will say that's a clue to you that you can go, boom, I can go right there. We can, yep,
Got
thank you
it.
very much. Shut up. I know exactly what the thing is. And you
Yeah, I
go
know
for it.
exactly what you're doing. Um, what I see are actually two things. One is actually not having any kind of a goal. And I know, I mean, you and I, and and just to mention the class that I've been in with you and Kimberly and a number of other people, that one of the pieces that you all talk about is putting a stake in the ground.
It's the first thing we talk about.
That's actually pretty true. Maybe hi, my name's Mark. Hi, my name's Kimberly. Let's put a stake in the ground. It sort of looks like a little bit like that. A way to sabotage ourselves is to put a stake in the ground that's too far out.
Okay. Fair enough. Yep.
I have run 8 marathons in my life and done
Oh,
a
wow.
number of triathlons. I remember the first day I ran, period. I was in my late 20s. I went for about a 1.5 mile run and I thought I was going to die. If my stake in the ground would have been 26.2 miles that first day, that's a self-sabotage.
Hmm.
What began happening was my stake in the ground began with being able to do a mile without dying. Then I had to do a new stake in the ground. It was like, well, let me see if I can get 2 miles.
Mhm.
And so that's one piece, is that when we set ourselves up to fail by either having our stake in the ground too far out, or by putting our stake in the ground with something that that you literally cannot do. Let me give an example of that. I'm used to be 6'3". I'm not anymore. I'm about 6'2" ish. And I played a lot of basketball, a lot of basketball. As a teenager, I could palm a basketball because I had big hands. Truth is I never could really dunk.
Mm.
I'd get close, but I never could really dunk. And so it was like, okay, I can either go, yeah, once out of every 35 tries, I can sort of semi dunk, and I could make that my goal and not do anything else. Or I could go, okay, so what can I do? If I can't do that, what can I do? And that's a whole different process. It's like, it's like I I became a very a very good shooter and a very good passer. And I mean, I could score well, but it was like, if my only goal was to dunk, then I was going to be in trouble. So it's like setting ourselves up either with a goal that's so far out, or a goal that's actually you can't really do. So that's one piece. So those are actually ways to keep ourselves from accomplishing anything.
So realistic goals,
Yeah,
realistic and we in parentheses achievable. But
right.
and I want to yes and that to say they're stretch goals. Jim Collins in his book Good to Great talked about, he called them BHAGs. People don't know that they came from Jim Collins. They think they invented it. BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals. So
Mm,
the ones that really stretched you. So we're there's a fine line between, like, I know I can do it, and it's going to stretch me a little bit, and I don't, and I think that the growth happens between those, the delta between those. I know I can do it, and I think I can do it, and I want to do it, and I'm going to do what it takes to stretch to get to it. As a that's the
no,
fine point of this, right? As opposed to the, I'm never going to climb Everest, so why set climbing Everest as a goal? So, like, what's the purpose of that? There's some self-aggrandizement to say, well, yeah, I'm gonna climb Everest, knowing
mm,
full well you're never going to be able to do it. Keep going. So that I just wanted to
no,
come in
no. I
because
think
as we talked about last week, we talked about the idea of having a goal in the first place. If you don't have an objective, we call them objectives, remember?
mhm,
It's like, if you don't know what you're doing, you're never going to get there, right?
right.
That old saw. So here what we're saying is, okay, it's kind of a part two of that, if you will, which
Mhm,
is either and to your point, it's not that you don't have them, is that you've unrealistically set them that they can ever be achieved, and you kind of know that, and that is the self-sabotage.
yes.
Got it.
The other kind of self-sabotage I see people doing is trying to get somewhere that they actually can get to, but they're trying to get to it too fast.
Give an example.
Well, example would be someone looking at you and what you've accomplished and going, and they're 25 and they're going, well, I knew what Mark did.
Great, I want to watch.
Same way with me. I see people that, they're 25, they graduated from a master's program in therapy, and it's like, they're out for a year and they're not quite sure why they can't do the same thing therapeutically that I can. One of the things, and I'm going to throw in a piece, and I don't know that we've talked about this much, is time is a big deal.
Yep.
Time
I'm gonna
is,
log that as that needs a show of its own.
yeah. One of the things we talk about with horsemanship is time in the saddle. And what, so this is another way that we sabotage yourself. I see people that ride an hour a week, hour and a half a week, say in a lesson. And at the end of the year, they say, I've ridden a year. Why am I not better?
Mhm.
And I say, well, how much have you ridden each time? Well, about an hour and a half a week. So what we're really talking about is maybe 70 hours a year. Well, 70 hours a year is basically 3 days, 2 days, something like that, 2.5 days. Riding 4 times a week for an hour and a half is a different gig than riding an hour a week. So at the end of the year, part of what's happening is that one person has 4 times the time in the saddle than the other person has. And so time is a really big deal. And we don't, I think because of the internet and the texting and all of the tech stuff, is that we think the time is compressed and should be compressed, and we can't do that. The technology has outpaced our evolutionary process.
Hmm.
And um,
Is
so
part of that like instant grat as well,
totally.
right? And you know, generation, I think it's a generational thing for sure, because
Mhm.
um I hate latency. I'm not comfortable with latency. I don't want late, but I'm a computer guy, right? So I want the mean time between the starting of an action and the completing of an action is 0. Right? I
Right.
said, boom. I was like, if I Google something, I want the answer now. I do not want to have to wait. And that is to your point. Um, but that behavior extends beyond our relationship with a screen, right? To your
Yes.
point, I expect that. Um, yeah, I'm gonna be professional. I mean, they used to say you got to pay your dues. You got to do the
Mhm.
work.
Right.
Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers tells a story that's, I don't know that the story is repeated, but the outcome where he says you need 10,000 hours of
Mhm.
doing a thing to become proficient at that. And, you know, he's such a good researcher. I love Malcolm for that, because he just researches the heck out of anything he writes, right? He's such a good journalist. And he's just studied people who are good at stuff, and it was 10,000 hours. And it turned out that the thing that you do when you have that time, which is when you're a teenager, right? I
Mm.
can sit in my room and play guitar for hours and hours. I can paint for hours and hours. I can work on, I'm watching a thing on the beginning of Industrial Light and Magic, starting with Star Wars, and all of those original guys, all during their teenage years were doing stop motion films at home because they were inspired by things they saw on Saturday in the movies with Ray
Mhm.
Harryhausen and those kind of things. So it's that 10,000 hours. And now in this time compressed life that we lead, where we're, you know, we have our relationship, we have our kids, we have our job, we have ourself, we don't have 10,000 hours.
Well, we don't think we do.
Oh, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. Yeah,
Well,
we need some hope, Doc.
yeah, we don't think we do. Let me get brain geeky here for a minute. When I'm working with training a horse to do something, The longest I work during any given time is maximum 40 to 45 minutes. I don't do 5 hours of asking my horse to learn something new. In
Hmm.
fact, that's incredibly counterproductive. And if anyone knows, if you remember at all or have any knowledge of the Lipizzaner stallions, they're the big white horses that jump up in the air and kick.
I think they're the Royal Lipizzaner
Yeah,
stallions.
the royal. Yes, thank you, sir. Even they work between 30 and 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And to train their horses, they're like some of the top, most well-trained horses in the world. Here's what happens. When we do something new, we do that and our brain begins to change and our brain grows what are called dendrites. If you can take pictures, and we have pictures of dendrites in our brain and in our brain cells, and they look like these trees growing up. And when we do something for say 20 to 30 minutes, our brain continues to work on that activity or that project for the next 24 to 48 hours,
Uh-huh.
whether we're doing that or not.
Uh-huh.
And what is happening is dendrites are growing to be able to allow our brain to become competent at what we were learning earlier in the day.
Okay, keep going.
So
Like this.
here's a cool thing. And this is an example. So let's say a little kid is learning how to ride a transitioning from a tricycle to a bicycle. And they're out and they are practicing and they go 10 feet and fall over. And then they go 12 feet and fall over. And their dad's running behind them holding the seat. And after a little while, the little person is going to get themselves frustrated. And they're, I don't want to ride it anymore. And because they keep falling off. And if the parent is following their kid pretty well, they'll say, okay, let's take a break. Let's go have dinner, do bath, go to bed, let the kid sleep. The next day, the kid will go, okay, I'll try one more time. Then they get on their bike and ride. And it's actually because dendrites have grown overnight.
Hmm.
And are allowing our bodies and our brains to incorporate the activities that we've done. And that happens whether it's a physical activity and it happens, or whether it's a intellectual activity or a combination of both. And then the more new things that we do, in other words, the more stakes we put in the ground, the more ability that we're going to have.
Hmm.
And but what our brains actually take time to, our brains need time to create those dendrites. They need time to put in for our nervous system to catch up with what we're doing and how we're doing it. The way that we oftentimes sabotage ourselves is, again, two ways. One is we don't try in the first place because we know it's just going to be too damn hard. It's like, I can't do that. Or what we do is we try and we don't allow ourselves to catch up with it, and we don't allow it to integrate into our systems. And or that we try it and along the way we don't go all in. And that's one of the other ways that we sabotage ourselves. And I don't know if you can see, but right behind you is the cutest little cat in the world.
He is the best distraction in the world for people I'm talking to, especially since I taught him. So I've been thinking in my head, does he has dendrites? Because I am teaching this little
No,
wonderful.
he is. Yes,
he does. And
yeah.
he has figured out there's a blue lobster in that tank.
Ah,
And he loves that tank and he loves that blue lobster.
yeah.
I'm loving all of this, and I'm thinking that one of the challenges for me right now is I don't have enough white space in my life. And
Mhm,
to me, white space is just unagended time that,
mhm.
and I think that's when the dendrites do their work. So that's why
That's
sleep,
exactly.
one of the reasons sleep is so important. We think we're heroes because we don't sleep. Oh, I was up till 2 a.m. I go to, yeah, dude, that's not a superhero. That's just stupid. Get some sleep. Seriously.
Well,
I wish someone had told me about the 3 free things there are in life when I was 20. Water, breathing, and sleep.
right on. Yeah.
Free, you know?
And those are the 3 things that grow what we need to grow.
Bingo.
And those are the things that, so let me put in another piece here, is you talking about free space or white space, that we need that space. We need that space when we either one push too hard and don't have that space, or we're not willing to step in and do the work, and we're always in white space.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
so there's this huge process that of literally stepping in, then resting, then stepping in, then resting, and stepping in and then resting. And the and then let me throw out, I don't know how we're doing on time, but let me throw out one other piece as a way that we sabotage ourselves is that we don't ask for help.
Yeah.
And um, that also is a really, really big deal. Is are we willing to ask for the help that we need? However,
It's
that may
actually
play itself out.
it's I think people think that it's a sign of weakness. The old joke is, the guy doesn't need a map. I don't need a map. I know where I'm going. I mean, that's an old joke, right? Hey,
I don't know if it, I think it's a real joke.
if there's a
I know
map,
how to get there.
I would like one, please. Thank you very much. Uh, I, I want to try to button this up to have guys look at where they're stuck along a path, and are they sabotaging themselves, right? Is there
Mhm,
self-sabotage involved? And it may be really hard to see it. I don't know. It may be one of those things that it, but you haven't called it. You haven't called it by name.
mhm.
And so maybe the first thing you do is say, yeah, yeah, shit, I'm okay, busted. You guys, thank you, elders.
Thank
That
you
I
very
was
much.
doing that. And
Right.
and the stake in the ground for that is, I would like to be better. I would like to get that out of my life. So the goal towards that, towards just getting better at that, not doing that, is to be aware of it, but also to set a realistic goal. This is probably something you've done all your life. So don't expect to be able to resolve this right away. But if we've made you aware of it, and you have like taken that in and go, and again, no shade on that, just, yeah, gosh, I guess I've been doing that. And
Mhm,
go back and listen to this episode again, because we talked about 4 different ways that you might be doing that. And as soon as you hear those, the answer to either just, as Kimberly's Japanese sword master would say, don't do that. That's all he would say.
don't do that.
He is, it's like, well, you're going to cut yourself down. You can strip all that shit away and just say, just don't do that. Right?
Mhm.
Do the work and don't do that. Mr. Freeman,
Thank you so much.
oh my God, this is another one of those where we dug in deep, weren't sure exactly where we're going when we started, but we got
We
there.
got there.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.